You said there's an issue. We just need to wait a second. You said there's an issue. We just need to. Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Catherine Grill, CEO and co-founder of Neolth, and we are back for another Neolth Ask the Experts live stream event. You all voted, and today we're going to be talking about hope for the new year. It is January. It's the start of the new year, and a lot of you have been asking about goal setting, planning for the new year, New Year's resolutions. So I brought on our CMO, Dr. Claire Wheeler, to talk a little bit about this topic. Dr. Wheeler, thanks so much for being here today. I was wondering if you can introduce yourself real quick, even though by this point, I bet a lot of people already know who you are, and share with us, what are New Year's resolutions and how did this whole tradition even start?
Hello, hi to everybody, and thank you, Dr. Grill, for that introduction. And hopefully some of you do remember me from interviews past and other videos. And I'm happy to be here talking about this issue today. It is late January of a whole new year, or at least a whole new year based on the calendar that we all use. And I did a little research on all of this because it is curious to me that we consider the middle of winter to be the start of really anything. And when I did a little digging, I found out that we have actually been celebrating the cycles of the seasons as long as we've been celebrating things and writing them down. So throughout human history, we've noticed beginnings and endings of things and times of transition. But it's interesting to me that all of this really kind of started with the Babylonians and the Romans and ancient civilizations up to 4,000 years ago. But back then, the new year was thought to start in spring at what's called the vernal equinox, or that moment astronomically when spring actually begins. And that really makes a lot of sense to me, and also from the perspective of nature, when things are waking up and there's more light available. So it's really an old idea to think about renewal, but really the ancient roots of New Year's resolutions and the whole concept of the new year really have their roots in nature and the natural cycles that we and all living things go through. And I think one of the problematic things about New Year's resolutions that has evolved, especially with more modern takes on all of this, is the underlying assumption that there's something wrong with you, that there's something that needs to be changed, or that something that you need to move away from. You need to give something up, or you need to take something on. And a lot of pressure builds up to do that right at the very time of year when most of us are most vulnerable. In terms of our ability to maintain our moods and maintain even our healthy habits that we already have in place, because winter is stressful with the holidays and the weather and the loss of sunlight. So all of these things really kind of come together in sort of a perfect storm of, pressure to make these new goals and think of this as a whole new beginning, but all the barriers that are in the way of actually doing so. And then there's that problematic underlying assumption that I think every one of us should challenge, that there's something about me that really needs to change, and it needs to change now. And it needs to be a big all or nothing change in a very short time frame. And all of that is somewhat self-defeating. So those are some of the problems and origins of New Year's resolutions.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because growing up, New Year's resolutions was something that people always talked about. It was a big topic, right? When you go back to school, everyone's asking, what are you doing for the new year? And recently, it's been a shift in the past couple of years. People have started to talk about how there is a lot of pressure with the new year. There is sometimes a seasonal depression, going from after the holidays, this very strange week in between if you celebrate the Christmas holidays and New Year's, and just feeling lost in time and what day is it even. And then you all of a sudden have to make these big changes, and there's this pressure, and it can actually affect our mental health. So I'm glad that you brought up the fact that even though it's very common to talk about New Year's resolutions, it may not always be good for our mental health, which leads me to the next part of this discussion. If someone is feeling that pressure, if they're feeling like it's not good for their mental health to focus on these New Year's resolutions, is there some sort of alternative?
Yeah, I think there are many, many alternatives. And I mean, and a lot of my thinking about this comes from some of the data and some of the statistics on this. And what was interesting to me is that the age group most likely to make New Year's resolutions is the age of our average Neolth user. At high school or college age and young adulthood, you have about over 60% of people saying that they're making New Year's resolutions. And sadly, only about half of those resolutions are kept for any significant amount of time. And, there's data coming from everywhere about this. And, what's the date when most people give up their resolutions, almost like it's a game. But it's not a game, because essentially when one has set up a goal that wasn't really well thought through, and then they don't meet that goal, what they've done is set themselves up for failure. And experiencing failure is a toxic thing that really erodes your ability to set new goals for yourself and accomplish new things for yourself. So there are a lot of different alternatives, and to making resolutions. And one of the things I would think about is the timing. Buck the trend. Make a resolution at the spring equinox. Make a resolution at the time of the year, maybe when you feel most resourced and well fed and well rested and moisturized and ready to go, right? And not in the winter when you're struggling, if you are struggling with the various challenges that winter presents. But I would also go all the way back to this, again, this presumption that there's something wrong with you that needs to change, and think about whether or not you can wrap your mind around maybe spending the rest of winter coming to terms with this and really going deep, and maybe journaling or doing some guided imagery or other types of exercises. Like, do I really feel that uneasy about who I am and where I am in my life? And the other side of this, and this comes from positive psychology, is it's so common for us. 18 good things could happen to me yesterday. If one bad thing happened, that might be what I think about all evening long. And so I think it's super important to make sure you do an inventory, not only of maybe things you want to change, but what went really well the last month, the last 6 months, and the last year. What did you accomplish? Part of this looking back, and we see this all over the media, best movies, best this, best that. Well, make your own list. What are the 10 best things I did this year for myself? What are some things I did that were good for my mental health, that I'm already benefiting from? And that's another thing is, it's very often a good idea to build on success you already have. And that's part of building self-efficacy. And self-efficacy is the belief that you have the capability to accomplish goals. And you can build that by building on other goals. And so one example is, let's say you've managed to get yourself out of the house and take a walk 1 or 2 days a week. That every time you do that, you give yourself credit for it, you acknowledge it, you congratulate yourself, and then maybe you can build on that goal. But it's hard to build on a foundation of success if you aren't even opening your eyes and your heart to the success that you've already had. So those are the two things I would start with. Number one, just questioning this assumption that you need to make a big change in your life. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. And then secondly, make sure that you're as aware of the successes you've had in the last few months or the last year as you are of the shortcomings or what you might think of as failures in the last year.
So much information. I actually took some notes because I was like, I'm getting really good advice here. I want to remember this advice, and hopefully I'm going to summarize it correctly. So there are alternatives to New Year's resolutions. If you're feeling a lot of pressure, if you're feeling like it's just not a good time to do a resolution, don't do it. No big deal. Don't have to do it. Some of the alternatives that you can do are even doing an inventory, a checklist, a mental inventory. Is there something I need to change? Do I just feel pressure because of the time of the year? Or is there really something that would be good for my health that I do want to make some changes? Thinking about, if you do identify a change, is now the right time? Or maybe I could do it in the spring, in the summer, another time. I know in the warmer weather, I have better mental health, I have better energy. So sometimes that's just easier for me to make those changes. So kind of doing that inventory and a real self-reflection of, do I need to change something? And if so, now. Then you also gave us a couple other, I think, key strategies here. Journaling, which is something I started doing. I got a journal for Christmas and I've been journaling every week, and it's actually been really cathartic. So there are a couple things like that. It sounds like you could do some journaling. I think you mentioned guided imagery, and then also making lists as well of, it sounds like maybe lists of things that you want to change or building on success of previous years. So I'm wondering if you could just jump a little bit deeper into that aspect, and anything else around avoiding the pitfalls of creating a New Year's resolution.
Definitely. Wow, that was a great summary. And I maybe could have said what I said in a shorter format. But one thing that I would that I have noticed is that a lot of New Year's resolutions people make are around weight or food or body and eating and movement. And I just would encourage people to, try to be really gentle with yourself around those issues, because there's so much stigma and so much commercialization and pressure on people of all genders, from all backgrounds, to do something about their body. And so for me, a good resolution or a good goal might be to spend a month appreciating my body before I think about how I want to change it. Research shows in self-regulation, it shows that you're more successful moving towards something you want than away from something you don't want. And moving away from something we don't want and not being mindful about what we're moving toward is the avenue toward things like using food to soothe yourself, or using substances in an unhealthy way, or too much screen time, and all the other things that we deem as unhealthy behaviors. Those are really coping mechanisms to move away from, say, maybe boredom or depression or dissatisfaction, or something that we want to move away from. So another thing I would think about is, when you're thinking about making change in your life, do I want to move away from this way that I feel every day? Okay, that's acceptable. That's a good goal. But I need to be clear about what I want to move toward. Do I want to feel more rested when I wake up in the morning, or more focused when it's time to work? And to have that be what you want, and that be that sort of the flame for your moth, like, that you're flying toward, that you're attracted to, that, first of all, you're going to be in a better mood whenever you think about that, like, oh, okay, I'm getting closer and closer to this thing I really want. And it also helps this sort of fundamental, almost primal way that we have as human beings of moving away from what we don't want, what we find aversive and uncomfortable, in whatever direction. And then we often will end up in a place engaging in behaviors or in environments or situations that are essentially just more of the same. So what I would really suggest is using these techniques, and you can also use art for this as well. And I have found that to be helpful too, making mind maps, or just get a big piece of paper and here's where I am, here's where I want to be. We have several exercises like that on the Neolth app, where you can just get to know yourself a little bit better, but think as much about what you want. How do you want to feel each day? What kind of satisfaction do you want to feel at the end of each day? What do you dread doing? How can you modify your life in a way that there are fewer things you dread and more things you look forward to? So just to be moving in a mindful way away from things, but mostly toward the things that you want, the things you want to be, and carry that with a sense of, like, this is for me, this is to make me happier, to help me in my growth. And then eventually that's going to ripple out. And it's okay to be selfish in that regard sometimes.
I love that. A little bit of a positive psychology spin, it seems like. So much this time, as always, flies by, but so much we learned. A little bit about the cycles of the year, how it's tied into nature. In certain parts of the country, you may have more or less extreme seasons. I know here in California, we don't have that big winter, but some of you might be getting a lot of snow right now, and just kind of thinking about how does that natural cycle of the seasons affect your energy? How does it affect your mental health? Just because it's trendy to have, a New Year's resolution doesn't mean you have to. So kind of taking that pressure off of yourself and saying it's not something I have to do. It's only something I should do if I want to, if I feel like there's a reason to change. Those all really sat with me. And then the last bit that you said, it's not necessarily about the negative. I know from positive psychology, we focus on negative things all the time, and it can be really beneficial to focus on that positive. So manifesting those goals and kind of what you're wanting in your life. I think there's a whole other conversation around goal setting that we can certainly have on a future live stream. That being said, we've summed it all up. Anything else, Dr. Wheeler, that you want to say in closing to the group?
Not really, except that I hope that whatever you decide to do for yourself, you do it with kindness and optimism. Have a great new year.
Kindness, definitely. And check out those self-compassion exercises on Neolth, or loving kindness meditations on Neolth too, if you want to learn more about bringing some kindness into your life and to yourself. So that is it. That was another Neolth Ask the Experts live stream event. It's January. We talked about hope for a new year, which is the topic that you all voted for on the Neolth app in the community poll. As a reminder, you can vote for the topic of next month's Ask the Expert live stream talk by anonymously voting in the app in that community poll. So thanks everyone for being here today, and we'll see you again next month. Bye-bye.